and giving condolence to their families.
As we heard, the commemoration today is for 29 years since the genocide. How is it that there are still burials happening today? You think there's 14 victims that are being buried today?
Yeah, unfortunately, after killing, bodies were buried in mass graves. But then they were taken out from those graves by construction machinery, bulldozers, and taken to secondary graves, again mass graves. During that process, bodies were dismembered. Sometimes they were taken from secondary graves to another place. So when investigators are searching for bodies, they find some parts of bodies on one place, the other part of body of the same person on other place. And that's the process which requires a lot of laboratory work with modern techniques to compare those remains found with samples from their family members and so on. And that process is lasting quite long. In the last year, they could identify remains of only 14 victims, and their Janaza burial will happen today.
And so are the investigations, are bodies still being dug up across
Yes.
the various sites?
And there are still few hundred, 700-800 bodies which we can't find.
Right, okay. And so today is an important commemoration of those people who have been identified.
Yes.
And why do you think it's important for Europe to commemorate this particular episode in history?
We need to remember our history. As people say, those who do not remember history can see situation that history is being repeated to them. We need to learn from the history in Bosnia and Herzegovina and everywhere else to be able to recognize what was happening and where does it lead. And that's importance of learning of the past to prevent it not happening in the future.
And that's a really interesting point, because obviously before 1992, Bosnia was part of the former Yugoslavia. It was heralded as this, kind of community that, almost didn't have any ethnic identity. You had the Winter Olympics as well in Sarajevo just a couple of years before. It was this modern, bright city in Europe. It was a European city. How did it get to the stage where you had 100,000 people being killed, before this particular genocide?
Yeah, I need to say ethnic belonging was recognized, but the whole system was based on equal rights for all ethnic groups. In all that, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a central republic in former Yugoslavia, populated with people belonging to three major ethnic groups: Bosniak Muslims, Serbs, Croats. Also was example of living together, of life where everybody was respecting the others, and they were sharing their daily life, going to schools together, working together. A lot of interreligious, interethnic marriages were present in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the whole situation came as a surprise to many of the people. But it was a result of growing nationalism, which started end of 80s, beginning of 90s, particularly in neighboring republics of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We believed, based on our past, such life that we had, that we can avoid such situation. But unfortunately, that war, that aggression was imposed on Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I can say in the worst possible way. So 92 meant beginning of what was called ethnic cleansing, not only conquering territories, but also expelling all those who were not of the same ethnic group as those who conquered from the territory. Result was the whole areas were ethnically cleansed. Eastern border of Bosnia and Herzegovina was mostly populated with Muslim population. They were mostly expelled, either internally displaced in Bosnia, within Bosnia and Herzegovina, or went as refugees to other European countries. So altogether 2 million people were forced to leave Bosnia and Herzegovina. But also mass killings were happening throughout the country, in Prijedor, in Sarajevo, which was under the siege for 3.5 years, Mostar, in many other places. What was happening in Srebrenica with such mass killings, with genocide, was culmination of all those atrocities.
And you lived through that. You were in Sarajevo at the time.
I was.
You were a member of the government. I think we were foreign minister at the time.
I was working in foreign ministry of Bosnia and Herzegovina during war.
And you had also lost family members during this time.
Practically there is no family in Sarajevo or throughout Bosnia which didn't suffer such losses. I lost my only sister during war.
And as you mentioned, the killings happened throughout the country. 2 million people internally displaced, from what you're saying, 100,000 people in total, 80,000 of them Bosnian Muslims who were killed. It took 3 years of that kind of ramping up of killings before any international intervention happened. Can you explain why that might have been?
Yeah, Bosnia and Herzegovina was under arms embargo, which was imposed on former Yugoslavia just before conflict started. But Bosnia suffered such embargo mostly because as a practically landlocked country, there was no way to provide any supply of weapons. So the other participants in this war had their own supplies, particularly Serb side, which took control of former Yugoslav army and used all weapons and infrastructure of that quite powerful army in performing their attacks. Parallel with beginning of conflict started also so-called peace negotiations, but which couldn't produce any meaningful result under such situation. We were asking for intervention. We believed in international law, in justice, in right to protect lives of civilians, but unfortunately it didn't come. There were such attempts, there were calls, media, public asking, but unfortunately it was such politics at that time in Europe specifically that they were not ready to intervene.
And it's extraordinary because there's a lot of parallels between, many would say, between what's happening in Gaza at the moment. Do you think that the Bosnians see an echo of what happened with them in 92 to 95 and what's happening in Gaza now with a lack of international support?
Yeah, you can find some parallels and similarities in those two conflicts or some other situations, but every of those conflicts has its own history, its own background, its own surrounding situation. So maybe it would be simplification to try to find parallels and make conclusions from all of that. When we are watching situation from Gaza, it evokes memories of suffering which we were witnessing in our country, and certainly we have sympathy for people, Palestinians in Gaza, and we ask for ceasefire, we ask for all humanitarian assistance, we ask for stopping attacks on civilians and suffering of civilians in Gaza.
And what do you think the lessons of, what do you think are the lessons of Bosnia and Srebrenica that maybe the world can take, I guess, in relation to what's happening in Europe? Obviously, there's a rise of the kind of far-right support as well as what's happening in terms of, the political situation in Gaza.
There are many lessons which can be learned and were learned from situation in Bosnia, from actions taken or lack of actions taken. There were serious lessons learned by system of United Nations, for example. They studied their activity or lack of activity during those years, and famous report was published in that time, which in a way determined future actions of the United Nations. Also, European countries learned lessons. I can mention that the whole government in Netherlands resigned after studying situation in Srebrenica, where their battalion was in charge of protecting safe zone, which they couldn't do at that time under those conditions. Yes, there were many lessons learned and also lessons for people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But the main lesson which I draw from all this is that saying which I hear in this country as well: for evil to happen, it's enough for good men to do nothing. We need to recognize situation. We need to be vigilant, to follow what's happening and recognize where does it lead and act early to prevent it developing. Because once it escalates, it's quite difficult to intervene and stop it and block it. Fortunately, at the end, we came to a situation that international community intervened, NATO intervened, and it was short period intervention which actually stopped fighting, and which led to peace negotiations, which resulted in concluding peace agreement. Maybe not just peace agreement, that it was peace agreement which enabled Bosnia and Herzegovina to continue its existence and start thinking about the future.
Okay. Ambassador Topčagić, thank you so much for the interview today. Really appreciate you being here on this very significant and important day. We were seeing some images, some live images while you were talking from the Potocari Memorial Centre, and I think you're very familiar with those pictures. And we will be coming back to those pictures as well throughout the morning and afternoon. But right now it's time for a break, but do come back in the next half an hour. Well, we'll be continuing our special programme on the 29th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide.
Start your day right with the UK's first Muslim morning show, Salam Britain,
where we dive into the trending stories that matter to you.
Share recipes from around the globe that will ignite your senses.
Celebrate guests that are making waves.
And showcase the diversity that makes our Ummah beautiful.
Join us Monday to Thursday here on Islam Channel.
Mecca. It was the most famous and largest city in the Arabian Peninsula during that era, and it is the place of pilgrimage of all the Arab tribes.
O pilgrims of the house of God, come closer, purchase your gods, and bless your homes.
They are asking us to return to the religion of Ibrahim.
If my request is met, I will sacrifice one of them as a sign of thanks, gratitude, and closeness.
In the Holy Quran, God Almighty has mentioned several times various creations of His, from animals to plants. In the behavior of some insects and birds, He set an example for humans to follow, so that they know their worth and are humble before the greatness of their Creator. He mentioned plants and fruits with delicious tastes and countless benefits. Is a journey of knowledge and faith that takes us to the world of God's magnificent creations with the joy of discovering His creatures' secrets to have better knowledge and stronger faith.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارع وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافذ.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Future that I wanted to make for myself. I was everything except the guilty one. And that's what they said. We were all guilty, only because of the name.
It's the first time she's told her story.
All what I could hear at that time is 5 soldiers starting the guns and saying stop. I stood there, couldn't move, and it was one person that I recognized. Sorry. He was my friend. And a few days before, we were sitting together in the cafe having drinks together.
Serb forces turned her village into a concentration camp and brought in thousands of Bosnian Muslims. Her family has been through this before.
It's 3 generations. My grandfather was in Auschwitz. My father and me, we were both in Ternopolje concentration camp.
Since she lived inside the concentration camp village, Elvira was allowed to remain in her house. She shared whatever food she could with the prisoners.
I was taking food every single day. Every morning we took the milk and bread. If nothing else, that's the first thing that we had to take to the babies. And I will never ever forget faces of these children. But they're just asking, can I have a little bit of milk? That's hard.
Fatima Klempic had recently finished medical school. She fled when Serb soldiers began killing Muslims in her hometown of Bratunac in eastern Bosnia. Like tens of thousands of others seeking safety, she fled to Srebrenica. It had been declared a UN safe zone, but lay under brutal siege for more than 3 years. And on the 11th of July 1995, the international community abandoned it. Serb forces rolled in. Women ran for help at the nearby UN base, but many men fled for the hills. Fatima joined them.
It was like Russian roulette. You know, like in the dreams, when you are trying to run and you can't, your legs are really heavy, and that's that feeling, I think.
15,000 men attempted to make the 100-kilometre journey. For 7 days and 7 nights, they ran through treacherous woods and steep hills, avoiding ambushes, snipers, shelling, and poison rivers. Less than half survived.
It was impossible. If you walk around, you just stepped on the bodies. So many dead people were there.
Those who were caught were led away by Serb soldiers and executed at point blank, their bodies hidden in mass graves. Many are yet to be found.
You know, when we walked through mountains, we didn't realize who is alive, who is dead, who is captured, what happened to anybody. You could see only small part of the column. But when we came to Tuzla, we realized that only about 4,000 people came. Days and days passed and they didn't come. And then we realized that many people were killed.
Srebrenica remains a global symbol of years of ethnic cleansing, the tip of a genocidal iceberg. Over 1 million people were made refugees. Some, like Elvira, found safety in the UK. But it's not the life she imagined.
I was planning to go to school. I wanted to be a chemist. Had so many different plans in my life. But absolutely everything changed. Everything.
For both Fatima and Elvira, their hopes for a brighter future lie with their children.
If you don't know your past, you're never going to know your future. They have to know that you can't treat people wrong or different only because they think different, they come from different group or they're different religion.
I try to teach them that they have to remember and they have to teach other people how to live without hatred. I hope that time will come once all people could live in peace without hatred. We are all human.
Some harrowing testimony from some extraordinarily brave women. Now, welcome back to the Islam Channel and our special program commemorating the 29th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. These are live images from Potocari in Srebrenica as the community there prepares to do Janaza prayers for 14 newly identified victims from that genocide. It's a Potocari Memorial Centre. Every year they come and commemorate with all of the victims and their families. Now, the benchmark to legally declare a genocide is a high one, and Srebrenica has met it. It can require many months, if not years, of painstaking research by independent investigators. After the peace agreement was reached in 1995, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia sent experts to Srebrenica to examine the crimes committed by the Serb forces. Now, one of those experts was Robert McNeil. He's a forensic technician from Scotland, and he joins me on video call now. Robert, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today on this programme.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
Can I ask you, Robert, so you were a forensic technician. What was your role during the sort of investigation of the war crimes?
Yeah, well, for 30 years, until 1995, I worked on cases of homicide and suicide and natural deaths in Scotland, working alongside pathologists. And so in early 1996, after the discovery through aerial photography of mass graves, I was asked if I would join the first team of international forensic specialists to go out to the Srebrenica area, where we were told that over 8,500 Muslim men and boys had simply disappeared, and they felt that the remains would be in those mass graves, which in fact was the case. So my job was to join the team and help recover the bodies and set up a temporary mortuary where, alongside the other experts, we established how they had died or been killed. And I should say that at that time, the bodies had began to decompose, but we were still able to establish the injuries that had been perpetrated against them, and some of those were very cruel injuries, which was deeply disturbing to us. And so I worked there for that first deployment in '96, and returned again the following year, '97, and every year following that up until 2002, when the ICTY had gathered enough forensic evidence to go ahead with the prosecutions of the main perpetrators.
That must have been extraordinary. So when you first arrived in Srebrenica, what were you expecting, and did it sort of exceed your expectations, sort of the scale of what you were witnessing?
Yes, well, I had worked, as I say, for a long time dealing with homicides, and but it was usually only one or maybe one or two victims. I think the sheer numbers was really quite disturbing and horrifying. None of the team and all of us had vast experience in our own work, but none of us had ever encountered anything quite like this. And so it was a real challenge to try to get through the work. And as I mentioned, we were told that there were 8,500 bodies, but by 1997, we started to be told that there were secondary graves discovered where the bodies had been removed from the primary graves and torn apart and put into these secondary graves. And instead of dealing with the 8,500 sets of human remains, we were faced with over 17,000 body parts. And because these graves were being discovered throughout Bosnia, the UN decided to set up a mortuary in central Bosnia, where instead of us going out to the graves, the bodies could be sent to us, exhumed and sent to us in this central mortuary in the town of Visoko.
And you mentioned this issue of secondary graves. So what exactly did the Serbs do? So they initially put them in mass graves, and then what happened? What was the reason for moving them into secondary mass graves?
Yes, well, I think that by the end of 1996, and even possibly before that, the Serbs knew that the Criminal Tribunal were coming after the perpetrators, and I think they believed that by removing the bodies from the primary graves and dismembering them in such a terrible way that we would never be able to find them, and if we did, we would never be able to establish how they had died, or indeed be able to identify them. And they got that completely wrong, because the work upscaled to the point where there were experts who deployed to Visoko from 32 countries worldwide, and so the work continued on a rotational basis right up until all of the evidence was, enough evidence was gathered for the ICTY, and then the identification were taken over by the fantastic work of the International Commissions on Missing Persons, and continues to this day.
And was it the fact of the secondary graves that contributed to labelling it as a genocide? It was sort of like an intentional covering up of what the Serbs had done.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that the forensic evidence that was gathered from the remains, which was that was our specialty, that evidence was enough for the prosecution to go ahead with the trials. But I'm absolutely convinced that, as you say, covering them up wouldn't have helped their cause. And it's worth pointing out that I think you mentioned earlier that genocide is one of the most difficult charges to prove, and that certainly was the case. But the defendants are some of the top lawyers in the world defending them, and so I think the case that was made by the prosecution was irrefutable, really, that many other crimes were committed as well, and war crimes, crimes against humanity, and of course the genocide that was ruled to be the case in Srebrenica and in Sarajevo.
And I will just point out to viewers that we're going to live pictures as Robert's speaking. We are going to live pictures of Partichari in Srebrenica as we're talking. You mentioned that when you first arrived in Srebrenica and to the kind of surrounding areas where the mass graves were, that the bodies were decomposing, but you still were able to see some signs of what had happened to them. Can you explain what it was that you were seeing, and what exactly is the benchmark for kind of a war crime or for genocide? How do you reach that? What's the level?
Well, it's really up to the judges to make a final ruling on the level of crime that was committed. We were just doing what we were asked to do, which was to gather evidence of unlawful killing. And as I say, it was up to the courts to rule on what level of crime it was. But I think for us, it was because of our experience, it was clear that these men and boys had been terribly beaten before they were killed, and so I personally felt that this was possibly the most serious crime that man could commit, and this went on not just for the victims from Srebrenica, but we recovered bodies from mass graves in the Prijedor area, where there were concentration camps, and many of those victims had been terribly tortured before they were murdered. So I think overall it was clear that this was a very, very serious, and these were very serious crimes that were happening. And I should also mention the fact that it wasn't just men and boys that were murdered. Many women and children died too, and it's not been mentioned also the sexual abuse that were perpetrated systematically against many women throughout Bosnia, in Visegrad and Prijedor, and throughout the whole country, really.
And you mentioned that you had been an investigator for previous crimes, for previous incidents. I know that you've been to Africa. You've went to obviously I think there was the tsunami in Thailand as well, and yet this is a very significant, I guess, genocide for you. It's a significant part of your life's experience, and you're very much involved in trying to commemorate and remember Srebrenica now. What is it about this particular conflict that has sort of made such a mark on your life?
No, that's a very good question. I think that after that first, or even during that first deployment in '96, it had changed me forever, really. I was so moved by what I had seen, and becoming involved with the women who would turn up at the mortuary every day looking for news of their loved ones, was extremely affecting. And you're right, I had worked in many other places throughout the world, but one of the reasons that I wanted to become involved after I retired, and continuing to talk about what happened in Bosnia, I think that, as I mentioned, there were over 32 experts from 32 countries went out there. And the one thing that I think I can bring to all of this is the fact that genocide denial is prevalent, certainly in Republika Srpska, but throughout the world it is generally denied. And forensic people tend not to talk about their experiences, partly because of confidentiality in cases, the court cases that may still be upcoming. But I felt that the work that we did should be talked about, because if nothing else, it challenges the genocide deniers, because I just don't believe that all of those specialists could be wrong in what they found. And so it's important, I think, that message gets told also.
Right. So, and I guess it was the scale of what you had seen that really kind of stuck with you. And at the moment, I mean, you're currently in Birmingham because I believe you're exhibiting some artwork as a result of your experiences in Srebrenica. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, when I retired, I started to experience symptoms of mild post-traumatic stress, and I want to emphasise that a few bad dreams, nightmares are nothing compared to what the victims had experienced. But it was quite disturbing to me, because by this time it was 40 years working with the dead, and I'd never encountered anything like that. And so I decided to teach myself how to paint, and instead of drawing painting normal things, I wanted to try and, as a therapy for myself, I guess, try and paint some of those images to help not only me as it did help me deal with it, but I also use those paintings to help teach people or educate people, and by using the paintings as illustrations, rather than using images of the dead, which I would find disrespectful. So So the paintings, I managed to do about 30 paintings, most of which I've donated to various organisations, and hopefully it will stimulate discussion about what happened in Bosnia. And so I'm happy to do that, and to go to schools and talk to young people about what happened in Bosnia.
Why do you think it's so important for people to remember, recognise and commemorate this genocide 29 years on? I mean, you know, many people have forgotten it, you know, it even happened, or maybe don't even realise it happened. What do you think is significant about commemorating this incident?
Well, personally, it's important to me, but in general, it is really important to remember. Apart from anything else, there are still many people who are looking for their loved ones that have never been found, or parts of their loved ones. But in general, I feel that a genocide like this that happened in Europe, the first since the Second World War, it really is important, and I find it quite hurtful when I hear sometimes commentators and politicians in the West who talk about the Ukraine, the terrible war that's going on in Ukraine, as the first in Europe since the Second World War, and that's extremely hurtful to the thousands, the many thousands, the 2 million who were displaced in Bosnia. As if it didn't happen, and so it is important to remember this, and I'm grateful to Remembering Srebrenica for the work that they do, and as the ambassador, I try to pass that message on, not just to parts of the UK, but in other parts of the world, including in the United States, and who have the greatest respect for the work that Remembering Srebrenica does.
And last question, with your artwork, what has been the response from people within the forensic community?
My artwork? Did you? Well, I haven't had much response from the forensic people. I've been retired for a long time now, and although I still keep in touch with many of my colleagues, you know, it's quite interesting what you say about how it affects you, but it's not uncommon that people who do this sort of work, and certainly me, I found one of the most difficult parts of it was coming home and trying to pick up a normal life again. And many of my colleagues have had similar experiences. So I think it's important that we do keep in touch with one another. And I'm looking forward to, well, looking forward is maybe not the right phrase, but next year being the 30th anniversary following the UN's resolution to mark the 11th of July as as a commemoration internationally. And it should be remembered that some people think that the UN have decided now that a genocide happened in Bosnia, but of course it was many years before that when the ICTY found that to be the case.
Okay, thank you so much, Robert McNeill, forensic technician for the Srebrenica genocide. Really appreciate you joining us this morning, and best of luck for your exhibition in Birmingham this afternoon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much as we continue to do the special programme on the 29th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. Been speaking to a number of guests, and we'll continue to speak with guests throughout the morning, and also take you to Srebrenica live to the Janaza service at 11 a.m. But we're going to go to a break now. Do join us afterwards.
احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
I'm keen to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my God, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as well.
The losing team out that way.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارعه وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافذ.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
I'm keen to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my God, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as well.
The losing team out that way.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
I'm keen to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my God, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as well.
The losing team out that way.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
I'm keen to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my God, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as well.
The losing team out that way.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارعه وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافذ.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارعه وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافذ.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this special show commemorating the 29th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide in Bosnia. Now, in around an hour, we'll bring you the live feed from Srebrenica itself, showing you the Janaza services for those victims of the genocide whose remains have been identified and other commemoration events. But first, let's go to a short film from 2016, which explores how many people fought to retain their humanity amidst the bloodshed with their individual acts of courage. In 1995, Europe witnessed the worst atrocity on its soil since the Second World War. Over 8,000 Muslim men and boys were systematically executed in just a few days in July during the genocide in Srebrenica. It was a culmination of years of brutal ethnic cleansing by Bosnian Serbs. Thousands were tortured and murdered. Men, women and children were starved in concentration camps. Up to 50,000 women were genocidally raped, and millions made refugees. But even in Bosnia's darkest days, there was some light and many acts of courage. Jovo, a Serb, and Shevko, a Muslim, have been friends since they were children. One day, the Serb army came to their village.
Došao je neki starješina i
komandant je bila
Lazo Babić. I on je održao sastanak da će doći vojska. Malo i nam je bilo to nezgodno zato što radi njih. Mi smo bili skupa na sastanku i rekli smo da dođe vojska, ali da i ne dira. Jer oni su isto nas spasili za vrijeme prošlog rata.
While in towns like Prijedor, non-Serbs were forced to wear white armbands. In Balvinja, the villagers looked after each other.
Ovdje, kad ja gledam na televiziju, u Prijedoru piše preko izloga nema brašna za muslimane i Hrvate. Trbusi do zuba. Mjesec dana išlo Banja Luka, dobila je 27 tona brašna. I prvo podmiruje muslimane i onda Srbe. Napravila je popis. Ali i meni šapće, uzmaj Šefko, ako nemam para, kaže uzmaj, bolam, platit će neko.
Smo stali iza tih svojih komšija i sada, ne. I ostali su, to ja mislim da je u Srpskoj Republici jedina džamija što ostala, evo zna Šefko, dok je bila vojska. Jedna cigla na njoj nije crijepo falio.
Ne, tak nije ispaljeno.
While these two friends stood side by side in Balvinja, in Sarajevo, the capital, another man risked his life and career to stand up for his fellow citizens. General Jovan Divjak was born in Serbia, but rose to commander in the Bosnian army. He watched as nationalism took hold in the country and Bosnian Muslims were targeted.
Pa sve ne traje u 24 sata, niti genocid u Srebrenici nije bio samo 11. jula. I pazite, i ponavljam, nije se genocid desio samo 11. jula ili ta 3 dana.
As the military campaign stepped up and tanks surrounded Sarajevo, a call was made for all ethnic Serbs to come together, but General Divjak refused.
Naravno, znajući moju strukturu kao ličnosti, opredelio sam se za pravu stranu, u pravo vreme i opredelio se za građane Bosne i Hercegovine, građane Sarajeva, nikakvu politiku.
Sarajevo lay under a brutal siege for more than 3 years. Thousands were killed.
Građani su me prihvatili kao da sam član njihove porodice, kuće, pa obilazeći jedinice, kvartove, znalo se da su me dočekali sa aplauzom kao da dolazi čovjek koji vanzemaljaca i naravno to mi je dalo moralnu satisfakciju da sam na pravom mjestu.
Today, he's a hero in Bosnia, but regarded as a traitor by many Serbs and faces arrest if he enters the country of his birth. Since the end of the war, he spent his life supporting the orphans of those killed in Sarajevo. Children were the biggest casualties of the conflict.
I was a news and current affairs camera operator with my husband Dan, who was reporting for television. And our translator found out that a baby had been born on Christmas Day to a woman who had been raped in a Serbian concentration camp.
She'd been raped because she was Muslim.
We edited the piece, and we thought her mother was Bosnian, birth father, Serbian. She'd be vilified on both sides. You know, who's going to want to care and love for this, give love to this tiny baby? And we just thought, what can we do?
Sean and Dan couldn't stand by. They adopted the little girl and called her Layla.
That act to save one person's life, well, yeah, that is my life. It wasn't until I was 18 and my parents sat me down and kind of explained what had happened to my birth mum, why she couldn't look after me.
In 2017, Layla went back to Bosnia and met her birth mother for the first time.
Me coming back and meeting her, that gave her some peace, because she is still suffering massively from the trauma. At the time, she didn't realise how strong she was being in letting me go and giving me another chance.
The story of ethnic cleansing and the Srebrenica genocide is one of unimaginable horror and cruelty. But even in terrible times, there are courageous individuals who refuse to let go of their humanity.
Like, I was born out of the worst hatred possible to happen. And if this story shows anything, it's about how, you know, from hatred can be love. That's the only way we're going to overcome things.
Evil happens when good men do nothing. And we need to do something. We can't be afraid. We need to say enough is enough. If it's just one person saying it, that is one person. Another person will join them, and another person.
It's about standing up for your friend. It's about, you know, standing up for yourself and what you believe in. But it's also about acknowledging that your friend's voice might not be the same voice as you, but yet you together should be united.
Now, that is some extraordinary testimony from incredibly courageous individuals. Now, it's been described by King Charles as a dreadful stain on our collective conscience. The genocide in Srebrenica remains the single worst atrocity that has taken place on European soil since the Second World War. However, many campaigners say that the massacre has been largely forgotten by Europe. The battle to commemorate the genocide in Europe has been led by Dr. Waqar Azmi, the chair of charity Remembering Srebrenica, and he joins me on video call this morning. Welcome, Dr. Azmi.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much for joining me on what is an incredibly busy day for you today. I wanted to ask you about the charity Remembering Srebrenica. You started this more than a decade ago. Can you tell me why you felt the need to set it up?
From our point of view, in Britain, for us as Muslim community as well as non-Muslim community who were experiencing this genocide on our television screens, reading in newspapers, we were affected. We were affected because we were witnessing that the world was standing by and not stopping this genocide. And at that time, in 1995, I was 25, and so many of my friends were tearful. They felt that they couldn't do anything. It was the horrific scenes on our television set day in, day out, reading about the rapes that were taking place. Around 50,000 women were raped simply because of their Muslim identity. Around 100,000 people were murdered across whole of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the fact that the international community was still not stopping this massacre, this genocide, this atrocity. And is that collective trauma that still lives with us. I feel that particularly for Muslim community in Britain and I believe across many parts of the world, because in this country we felt that if this could happen to people who are white, Europeans, who are indigenous community who were assimilated, who had the same culture as the Serbs, who had the same language, the same food, who looked like them, that this could happen to them just because of their Muslim identity. What could happen to people like us in terms of our color? You know, we have different color, we're brown, we're black, you know, we have different culture, different traditions. So it really was firstly the collective trauma, and we felt that we needed to honor the victims. And secondly was the fear that as Muslims, this could happen if we do not raise awareness about the consequences of Islamophobia, about the consequences of hatred, that we must come together as one community, as one group of people to stand up against hatred, against Islamophobia. But we must also honor those innocent people who were murdered, those innocent women who were raped, those children who have been made orphans, the homes destroyed, that we must not forget. And we must always remember so that we can stand up and not stand by.
So this was really something that kind of the germ of this idea started immediately, you know, after the war, or even during the time of the war, and then, you know, obviously became this charity. Was there something? I mean, I think was it in 2010 or 2011, which was the first time when I heard of your charity. Was there something happening in British society that you thought, well, now is the time for people to commemorate and to remember, you know, this terrible atrocity which happened, you know, 20 odd years ago, as it was then?
I think, I mean, certainly, so it's 2000, you're right, the work started around that time. 2013 is when we had the first national memorial event in the UK at Lancaster House, in which Foreign Secretary William Hague attended and spoke at. But this is something that we always wanted to do. And a number of people came together at the same time, including Baroness Varsi, who was the Foreign Secretary, as well as we had Ed Llewellyn, who was the Chief of Staff at the time with Lord Paddy Ashton. Now, Lord Paddy Ashton was the EU High Representative in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Ed Llewellyn was the Chief of Staff, became Chief of Staff later on in number 10 with David Cameron. So a number of people really came together. Baroness Aminka Helic was in the Foreign Office at the time with Foreign Secretary William Hague. So a number of people came together from all groups really. So it wasn't just one political party. So Remembrance is a cross-party charity supported by Labour government, Labour Party, by the Conservatives, by Liberal Democrats, by the Scottish National, and other leaders and parties across the devolved system in the UK. So 2013 is when we had the first commemoration, and in that we felt that the mothers of Srebrenica, who experienced the worst form of hatred and experienced their loved ones being murdered, should be invited, who came, and that was the first time when we heard from the mothers themselves in the UK. And what we have now, since 2013, is around 1,500 community champions that the charity has. It is all voluntary driven. As chair, I'm a volunteer. Robert McNeil, you had earlier on as ambassador, is a volunteer. So we have 1,500 community champions across the United Kingdom. We have 12 boards in the English regions, plus in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And now what we have in the UK is the largest commemoration of the Bosnian genocide. We have around 1,200 events and activities taking place in schools, in town halls, in police stations, in places of worship, workplaces, and thousands of people are coming together to honor the victims, to remember the genocide, to reject Islamophobia and hatred in all shapes and form. And so that is the work of the volunteers of the charity since 2013, where now Britain comes together to commemorate and to teach people about rejecting anti-Muslim hatred, rejecting Islamophobia, rejecting hatred in general. And that is I would say one of the greatest achievement is to institutionalize this commemoration in the UK, to make it a calendar event. The other, I would say, achievement is that we've educated 200,000 children, young people in schools. We train teachers, we develop educational programs and educational materials for the teachers to teach children. The teaching of the Srebrenica genocide, the Bosnian genocide, is not part of the English curriculum system, but the teachers, as part of the PSHE programs, do teach children about the Srebrenica genocide. So 200,000 children have been taught, and we've also created 1,700 community champions. And these are people who've gone to Srebrenica and come back, who have bore witness to the atrocities, who have visited the graves, who have met the survivors, and come back and become community champions against genocide, against hatred, and a voice for the community, to bring communities together, to reject hatred, to tackle hatred. And these amazing community champions are doing amazing work in their local communities, doing a whole range of social action projects. And that really, to me, is a achievement driven by volunteers, driven by ordinary people, and I feel that that's something that should be replicated across the world, across Europe, so that we can create more cohesive communities, that we can learn to teach people about rejecting hatred, so that we don't become bystanders. And this is the key message of Remembering Srebrenica UK charity.
I mean, it's an extraordinary series of achievements, in just over 10 years. There is a wider purpose. You sort of alluded to that just now, that it's not just about remembering Srebrenica for the sake of remembering Srebrenica. Is there a wider purpose in the charity?
Absolutely. I think as human beings, we have the capability to be evil and the capability to be good. And what we saw in Bosnia was that people who were neighbors, people who were teachers, people who were friends, turned against their friends. Teacher turns against the student. The teacher became the perpetrator, the killer, the murderer. And that is unimaginable. Sometimes we think that, how can that be, that you've been friends with someone, that you've ate together, you've spent your whole life together, and yet your friend will turn against you. It is horrific to imagine that, but that's what exactly happened in Bosnia-Herzegovina, that when the extremists, the nationalists, the fascist leaders like Mladic, Kadic, and Milosevic called upon the Serbs to come together, people actually left their friends, became the perpetrators. People became the murderers, and that's something which, for me and for all of us, it should really open our eyes that if this could happen then we need to ensure that we build resilience and that we teach people to reject not just extremism and fascism and the evil ideology, but also equip people to strengthen their hands so that they can stand up to leaders who are causing destruction around the world, so they can stand up and reject the ideology of division, the ideology of hatred. And what I would say that Remembering Srebrenica's message is that we look at atrocities across the world and we talk about, and this is a saying, isn't it, that we should speak truth to power. Actually, the power knows the truth and still commits the atrocities. The power knows the truth and still continues the genocide. And that's what happened in Bosnia. The power knew that this was a genocide. The international community knew this was a genocide, and still, the genocide was allowed to be committed. So speaking truth to power, well, the power know exactly, but their interests come first. They put their interests before lives of people, before lives of human beings, and they will do whatever necessary to protect their interests. So Remembering Srebrenica's message really, and in answer to your question, is wider than that, to say we need to speak truth to people. It's not just enough to speak truth to power. We have to, because the power knows the truth, we have to speak truth to people so that the people can come together and say that this is wrong. And the people could put pressure on the powerful people, on their leaders, on the political leaders, on the civil society leaders, to say, no, we're going to reject this. We will not follow you because this is wrong. And we want to be on the right side of history. And this is what is needed. So the mission of Remembering Srebrenica, and I believe that it should be mission of all organizations working around this area, to actually speak truth to people so that people can put pressure on their leaders to reject their ideology and what they're trying to do. And that is what did not happen in Bosnia. The Serb community, not everyone, by the way, we saw General Divjak, who recently passed away. General Divjak was a Serb who rejected the call for the Serbs by the Serb leaders of Mladic, Karadzic, Milosevic. And there are many Serbs who rejected that. But there's many others who actually supported that call and the call for evil to take place, for the call for the murders to take place. And we need to ensure that in our communities, in our countries, that we speak truth to people, so all people can come together, whatever your religion or no faith, whatever your ethnicity, that we come together and reject those leaders that are causing division, that are promoting hatred, that want to go to kill people, that want to go to war. And that is the work that is so needed, especially now when the world seems so dark suddenly, when we see the rise of extremism and fascism in every way, when we see the rise of the far right. If we look at across Europe, Marie Le Pen, for example, in France, in the first round of the election, got the majority vote. Thank goodness that in the second round, the other parties came together as a joint coalition and basically have now pushed Marie Le Pen in the third position. But if you look at in Holland, Red Wilders.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
I'm keen to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as well.
The losing team out that way.
29 years of denial and only classed as genocide several years ago, bringing little justice or solace to those seeking to bury loved ones. Their wounds still healing. Srebrenica must be remembered.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارعه وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافق.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
Looking to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as we hold it.
The losing team out that way.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارعه وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافق.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارعه وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافق.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارعه وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافق.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
Looking to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as we hold it.
The losing team out that way.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارعه وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافق.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
Looking to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as well.
The losing team out that way.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارع وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافذ.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارع وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافذ.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارع وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافذ.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
Looking to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as well.
The losing team out that way.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Islam channel, where we have a special morning commemorating the 29th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. I'm now joined in the studio by Safat Vukalic, who is a survivor of ethnic cleansing by the Serbs. Welcome to the studio. Thank you very much. Could you tell me, Safat, a little bit about what actually started this whole thing? I mean, we often hear about ethnic cleansing, we hear about genocide in Bosnia through the lens of Srebrenica, but that really was just the end, wasn't it? It wasn't the beginning.
I mean, to really get full story, you'd have to go back centuries, because Bosnia's been in existence for centuries, and then it's been ruled by different rulers over time, and that all kind of came out effectively because of Ottoman Empire, for example. Muslims were called during the war Turks, well, just prior, kind of that that was the derogatory reference to, and it was. I mean, Bosnia was part of also Yugoslavia. It was a republic. He had the established borders like all the other 5 republics, and so it wasn't created out of war. The entities inside it did come out of the war, out of genocide, but not Bosnia itself. And it still is a beautiful country, and it's got beautiful people. But unfortunately, you had extremists that wanted to get more power after Tito died in 1980. There was that power struggle, and Milosevic ended up seeing himself as someone who should be able to effectively rule the whole of Yugoslavia, and the other republics, representatives, presidents of other republics, they disagreed, and eventually, as they couldn't come to an agreement as to how to still be together, then they started deciding to go independently and separate. First it was Slovenia, then it was Croatia, then it was Bosnia, and the rest we're still talking about.
And you were 16 at the time. You were living in Prijedor. You were old enough to see the drip kind of poison that was coming out at the time. Can you tell me a bit about that? How did things change in just those few years?
Well, I've often mentioned prior to the war, there was a long-running series about the war between Serbia and the Ottoman Empire, and how the Serbs or people suffered. No one else suffered but Serbs, and that kind of. Towards the end of the I think it was 1989, I think, when Milosevic held his speech in Kosovo, and it was all about, this is Serbian land, and wherever there's Serbian foot, it's Serbian land. So that kind of kept, the politicians started using that, the extremists. He was social democrat apparently, but there was those kind of more extreme views that started becoming more announced publicly to everyone, and it started to once you start hearing that live on TV from people who are politicians in parliaments, etc. And then obviously media joins in and makes everything bigger, and you just started to worry, where's this going? And then as in Slovenia went independently in Croatia, and the war broke out in Croatia in '91, there were clear threats to Bosnian population, and they wanted us to stay in Greater Serbia idea. And the threats were made clear in the parliament by Serbian extremist politicians. That
what kind of things were they saying?
They would say the Muslims would disappear. Don't even think about referendum, because there was a referendum that took place. So it was again put to people to decide, and it was boycotted by vast, larger portion of Serbian population because of the nationalists, and they tried to block it, but it did go ahead, and I think there was still over 66%, I can't remember exactly, people who voted, and vast majority voted for independence. And it was to be Bosnia, which is made of different religion, as it's been sort of built over the years, centuries. It was specific. I always, and I know other people have seen it that way as well, but I've always seen it as a small sort of form of Yugoslavia. It was that mix of religions together, which is all the other sort of republics, countries now, were quite different. They had the dominance of one, and whereas in Bosnia we all learned supposedly Serbo-Croatian language, but it was only properly used in Bosnia. I remember I had one family who came from Croatia, a Serbian family during the war in Croatia, and he didn't know how to write Cyrillics, which is like, how come? It was still Yugoslavia, did you not learn that? But apparently It was only in Bosnia that we learned what everyone else should have. Everyone else was going their own way a long time ago.
And did you see a sort of drip sort of kind of, I guess, targeting of Muslims at the time when, I mean, you were 16 years old. Did you see that there was like a change in language specifically towards Muslims?
So that, just before the referendum, I was during the Croatian War in '91. There was a part of Croatia that was occupied by Serbs, and it was called Serbian Krajina, and they also started forming sort of united kind of a region with extremist Serb in Bosnia. So even before the referendum, there was it was called different. It wasn't called Republika Srpska, and they were formed back on 9th of January 1992. So it was 2 months before the referendum took even place. So they tried to kind of divide Bosnia. It was all about this is Serbian land. So as if Bosniaks, Bosnian Muslims, and Bosnian Croats or Catholics or Jews. They've been there for hundreds of years as well. Romas, as if no one else exists. No one else has a right to that land. And
then your family were very specifically targeted. Can you tell me briefly what happened to them?
I wouldn't say they were specifically. It was when they took over the local government in Prijedor. I wouldn't say they, the Serbian party, which was the party led by Radovan Karadzic. They ran the whole thing, and it was all we learned after. I learned after the war that there was a meeting that took place in 1991 in Prijedor to plan concentration camps, how to take over the local governments, local police station, the territorial army, and we had no idea. So they started then going through each village, surrounding villages in Prijedor, and we could see them being bombarded, burnt, and then you can hear that armies gone in, collected people, and eventually turned to my neighborhood, and the soldiers came through and shouting, "All the men come out!" Now we knew that meant non-Serbs, and everyone started walking. I started walking after my dad and my brother, and my mum said to me, "You get back your child," and I did go back, and I keep saying that saved my life. No doubt, I would not survive a concentration camp, 100%. But as I never argued with my mum, I listened, and I stayed, and I wasn't picked up. Even we had the soldier who came back looking for one of our neighbours, and he saw me, but all he was interested in taking her car, so he didn't really bother about me. So I was quite lucky because younger people ended up in camps. I every time I talk about it, I can see that image of soldiers coming through and people walking up the road to be taken away to concentration camp.
Yeah. Last question, because the viewers will just have been able to see a live feed of the memorial services in Potocari. They're just getting ready to do the Janaza service now. Just very briefly, just tell me how important it is for you as a Bosnian in the UK to commemorate what's happening today.
If you don't commemorate, you want to forget. If you forget, you don't respect the people that passed away, and you don't want to learn the lessons, and we will keep repeating and repeating, and it will never stop. And that's why it's important to commemorate, to make sure we do remember and remind people of what happened. But it's also important to continue learning. Learning shouldn't be just about numbers and how many people died and what month, date, etc. It should be, how did it come to that? What happened? How did it happen? Who did it? Who could have stopped it? And what do we do after genocide happens? And in Bosnia, they've not allowed Bosnia to move on. And that's what has the international community still just in status quo, and things have been getting worse in the last few years.
And the situation is obviously, as you say, getting worse. It's continuing right now. Safet Vukulic, I'm so sorry we're having to cut you short a little bit. I will have to go to a break, and then we'll be back with Dr. Waqar Azmi shortly, where we'll be moving to the Srebrenica memorial service.
على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
I'm going to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as we hold it.
The losing team out that way.
"29 years of denial and only classed as genocide several years ago, bringing little justice or solace to those seeking to bury loved ones. Their wounds still healing. Srebrenica must be remembered."
هذا فتى قريش ومصارع وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافذ.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
I'm going to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as we hold it.
The losing team out that way.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارع وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافذ.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
I'm going to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as we hold it.
The losing team out that way.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to the Islam channel. I'm here with Safat Vukilic again. We'll carry on the discussion until the live Janaza prayers start. I wanted to ask you about the situation in Bosnia at the moment, because your father, your brother were in a concentration camp. You were talking earlier about how you narrowly escaped it because your mum basically told you to stay back. Mums are always right, as we know. What is the situation in Bosnia now between the different communities?
Actually, between the communities, it's not as bad as between politicians, and I think that's one of the issues that we got. Is when we look at the political situation, there's division, and people want to remain in that division because that's the only way some people will be in power. Otherwise, if you have proper democracy and people were there because they deserve to be and voting for one person rather than three, and certain people being excluded, many of them wouldn't be in that position. We've got more politicians per head than any other country. And that's awful, considering what that country needs after war is no more politicians. And I go back to Prijedor, and I still are going to Prijedor as much as there's hurt because of what I call still occupied territory. But it is my town, and I go to neighbours. So I've got Serbs who are friends, who remained friends with us, and made new ones. And when you go in, when you hear, they're complaining about their own politicians. But as you haven't got that power because of how things work with the extremists, have gone into power, they're going to they're owners of the factories and all that. So as soon as you start talking against them, you're going to lose your job. There's going to be pressure on your family. There's going to be threats. There are people who, journalists or doctors who are trying to talk about what happened during the war in Prijedor, and they're straight away called traitors,
right,
threatened by other Serbs, etc. There are war criminals still walking the streets in Prijedor, as well as other towns around Bosnia.
So is it harder to kind of commemorate the genocide in some parts of Bosnia than it is in Europe or the UK?
Half of Bosnia doesn't recognise that there was genocide. They don't accept it. They don't even recognise the country that Milorad Dodik, who's president of the Republika Srpska, openly says all the time, publicly, whatever, Bosnia's not a country. Yet somehow he's happy to take money from the Bosnian parliament budget or whatever. He denies genocide. Yet we've had a law 2 years ago against genocide denial, but no one's taken action against him. And along with many other politicians, and yet you have Brussels and Moscow. They're both happy to see Dodik and speak to him.
Do you think there's a potential for conflict to start again in the Balkans?
Well, absolutely, because they keep saying we want to join Serbia, and obviously, we can't allow that to happen. That is our country. There's there are still many people.
So it's a really weird feature of the Dayton Agreement, right? That Bosnia was essentially split into kind of Bosnia and then like the Republika Srpska, which is basically where
it was a Dayton peace agreement.
Right.
It wasn't meant to run the country. It was a peace agreement. So you had signatories from Serbia and Croatia, because they both at one point agreed to divide Bosnia between them, and they both joined at one point against Bosnia, and then eventually Croatia, under pressure by the USA, changed it, their position. And that's when they managed to then, because the Bosnian army advances, they also managed to free Croatia. So Croatia doesn't have a Serbian region under occupation as they did before. But unfortunately, so in Bosnia, the Serbian army controlled over 70% at one point, I believe. And it went down to 49%. But that was the peace agreement. That wasn't supposed to be kind of in stone, and that's the division.
But it's remained that way.
Well, because those extremists know the only way they can stay in power and control that, it's because that division keeps them there. They celebrate war criminals. They've got a student dorm named after Radovan Karadzic, and they feel that's normal. And how they can be given all the money to do whatever they want to do is just not right.
Okay. Yeah. Safat Vukilic, thank you very much. Obviously, still a very I guess, tinderbox type situation, kind of existing in Bosnia at the moment. You can see live pictures now of the Janaza prayers, which are about to start. I'm also joined on the line with Dr. Wakar Azmi. Dr. Wakar, what's happening at the moment?
So at the moment is the Fatiha, which is taking place in front of the 14 taboos, the 14 coffins, and people will be laying flowers. These are dignitaries, ambassadors, key figures representing different countries who have come to Srebrenica to pay their respect and to represent their country, who will be laying flowers. The flowers would also be laid by the mothers of Srebrenica. So you can see the mothers with the dignitaries walking together to lay the flowers at the Srebrenica Memorial for the Chari complex. We have in Bosnia the ceremony separated in two parts. The first part was in the morning where you had political speeches by the European EU High Representative Christian Smith, as well as other political leaders. The second part is a religious ceremony, which is the Janaza. So that started now. In the just behind the mothers, where the dignitary, you can see the president of Bosnia, the chairman of the presidency, President Denis Bečirović, who will be doing the dua and then laying the flowers. So this is the dua which is taking place right now. The stone where the flowers are being laid is where all dignitaries lay their flowers. Behind the stone are the graves of 8,372 innocent people who were murdered simply because of their Muslim identity. Now, the president is in the middle, Denis Bečirović, who is doing the Fatiha with the dua, and accompanied by the other dignitaries. So that is currently live now. We are seeing the other participants within the ceremony. What will happen is one by one people will come and do dua or lay flowers to represent their country or to represent their organization. That's going to happen up until the Janaza prayer. The Janaza prayer will be led by the Raisul Ulama, the Grand Mufti of Bosnia, Hussein Kavazovic. His Excellency Hussein Kavazovic should lead the Janaza prayer for the 14 victims of those who have been buried today. Each year, the victims' bones are identified. So, in between 1992 and 95, innocent people were murdered, and their bodies were thrown in mass graves. And the perpetrators, the Serbs, when they thought that these graves were so huge that their crimes would be caught. This is ex-president, former President Bakir Izetbegović, by the way, who is just done the dua and who is now moving. And these are the members of the Christian Orthodox community who have come to pay the respect at the Muslim cemetery at the site of the graves of the innocent Muslims who were murdered in the genocide. So you'll see different organizations, different groups, different religious leaders, ambassadors of different countries coming and paying their respect at the Chari Memorial Complex, where the stone is the symbol of laying the wreath or laying flowers and doing dua. Behind the stone, where they're laying the wreath and the flower, is the graves of 8,372 innocent people who were murdered. And these are all people who are in the queue to lay the wreath and pay the respect. These are the graves we're seeing. Where mothers and those who lost their loved ones are going to their loved ones' graves and doing individual prayer, and that's the whole scene of the Potachari Memorial Complex. You're seeing where only where people are laying the wreath, but now the camera should move to the left-hand side of the screen. You can see the graves, and you can see the 8,372 graves there, the stones. And the way it's been designed is in the shape of the Srebrenica flower, which commemorates the genocide. The Srebrenica flower, you can see people wearing on their lapels, on their suits. You'll see that. I'm wearing it on my suit today, basically to commemorate the genocide. It has 11 petals to mark 11th of July as the day of Srebrenica Memorial Day. So 11th of July is the international day accepted by the United Nations as the day of Srebrenica Memorial Day. The green in the middle of the flower is the sign for hope in humanity, and the whiteness of the flower represents the innocent people who were murdered simply because of their Muslim identity. So,
just to interrupt you, this is quite a spectacle. It's an enormous, it's an enormous cemetery site, and there's obviously many dignitaries. So obviously many dignitaries from across the world today for this afternoon. But it wasn't always like this. There was a bit of a challenge to even get to this point, right?
Of course, you're right. So initially the Srebrenica Memorial site that we're seeing, it falls within the territory of Republic Srpska. Republic Srpska is controlled by the very people who carried out the genocide. The Republic Srpska was, as a territory, created through genocide, through ethnic cleansing, but it is controlled by the political party and the leaders as the life who committed genocide. So this territory now, which is in the town of Srebrenica, the area is called Potachari, and this area now has become a internationally recognized area that is...
sorry, just to interrupt you again, I think that's Muqtaz Azaiza, who's the photographer from Gaza, who's paying his respects as well. So there's definitely a kind of, I think the kind of trauma of the Bosnia genocide is obviously, they're recognizing what's happening, with their experience in Gaza as well.
Absolutely. And you're correct to identify that, Tamanna. And so I was saying that, so this site now is become an internationally protected site where the memorial and Janaza can take place. But before, if it wasn't protected site by the international community, we would not be witnessing this ceremony today. It wouldn't be allowed. As is the case in Prijedor, around the area of Bratuna, in Prijedor, Foča, Bratuna, all these areas where there's a lot of harassment when people want to just pay respect to their loved ones. But that is something which in Srebrenica, because it is an internationally protected site, people have gathered and paying the respect. I was saying earlier on that when the people were murdered, they were thrown into bodies were thrown into mass graves, and through forensic science, when the Serbs found that their bodies were, the mass graves were too big and they would be caught for genocide, they'll be tried for genocide, they dug the graves. They took diggers many months later, dug the graves and put the bodies into secondary graves to hide their crime. When they found that even the secondary graves were so large that they would be caught out, they took diggers again many months later, dug the graves again, and put the bodies on front line to show to the world that these were all fighters, so they're not innocent civilians, they're all fighters. And it's only through what the Serbs forgot was that forensic science had developed by then. And it's only through forensic science that people like you had earlier in your program, Robert McNeil from Britain, who is the ambassador of Remembrance Srebrenica, chair of the Remembrance Srebrenica board, ambassadors board in Scotland, who were sent, and through forensic science, they basically found the bone of one person, for example, on the front line, and the leg of the same person is 60 miles away in a village, and that's how they've been piecing the bodies together. It's called the human jigsaw. They piece the bodies together each year. When the bodies are pieced together, they find the bones in village, a hand in one place, one village, or leg in front line. And when they piece it together, then they do the burial on this day every year on 11th of July. So today we'll see the burial of 14 innocent people who were murdered, and these 14 people include, and I think we should actually read that will be murdered, because who were murdered will be buried today, because these people are people who were murdered simply because of their ethnicity, and the youngest person who will be buried today was 17 years old, who was murdered, will be buried today. The 14 bodies that will be buried today include the body of Hasib Efendic, who was born in 1931, and at the time of his murder, he was 64 years old. Chamil Efendic, who was born in 1928, and when he was murdered in the genocide, he was 67 years old. Mehmet Kırcic, who was born in 1961, he was 34 years old at the time of the genocide. Sabria Omic, who was born in 1966, who was 29 at the time of the murder in 1995. Mushan Silikovic, who was born in 1956 and was 39. Sakib Harbash, 1975 was the date of birth, and was 20 when he was murdered in 1995. Beres Miwic, 1978 is when he was born. He was 17, so Beres was 17 when he was murdered in the genocide in Bosnia. Ahmed Yasharovic was born in 1971, and Ahmed was 20 years old when he was killed. Nevres Salihovic was born in 1970, and Nevres was 25 when he was killed in the genocide. Ibrahim Salkic was born in 1935, and Ibrahim was 60 years old when he was killed in the genocide. Midhat Basic was born in 1973, and Midhat was 22 years old when he was killed in the genocide. Haydin Mustafovic was born in 1959, and Haydin was 36 when he was killed in the genocide. Latif Manzic was born in 1964, and Latif was 31 years old when he was killed in the genocide. And finally, the final victim, Hamid Salic, was born in 1927. He was the oldest victim in 1995. He was 68 years old when he was murdered. So these 14 people, innocent people who were murdered, will be buried today. The Janaza will take place. What we're witnessing at the moment, Tamanna, are scenes of different dignitaries, different ambassadors from different countries, representing their countries, laying the flowers, as well as the politicians from Bosnia and Herzegovina of different parties coming together to lay flowers to pay the respects to the victims of the genocide in Srebrenica.
It's interesting to me that when you sort of named those 14 victims and their ages, it's very easy, I think, sometimes to forget that there are individual people who were killed in amongst 8,500. Feels like an anonymous number, but when you kind of individualize it to you know, their ages and you think about their families, you know, this really brings it home, I think, the pain, the immense pain that, you know, Bosnians still feel about this genocide, about the conflict in general. It's very specifically, you know, it wasn't men who were fighting age, it wasn't anybody who was fighting, you know, the weapons had been taken away by, the Bosnians had agreed to take the weapons away, although obviously there were still some small numbers, you know, against you know, one of the best militaries in the world at the time. What is it that has made it, you know, what is it that kind of put it down as a genocide? Because it wasn't like every single person was killed, and that's often misunderstood. Can you explain a bit about what it means when you label something as a genocide and you know, not everybody gets killed?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of the ideology of genocide, is that there is intent to destroy and eliminate the whole or part of a ethnic group or religious group, a particular group of people. And that was the ideology that was promoted by the leaders of the Bosnian Serb leaders, which include Milosevic, Karadzic, and Mladic, who is the commander. The ideology was very simple, which is that we want to create a pure a territory for purely Serbian people. We want to create a territory where there are no non-Serbs living there, because this is the race which deserves to live here, and the other people do not belong here. That's the ideology. One of the leaders of the party, the Republika Srpska party that carried out the genocide, Biljana Plasic, said, and I want to quote her because it just shows the mentality at the time. She said, and I quote, that those people who accepted Islam, in other words, her people, because they're all Slavs, they're all white, they're all of the same race, but those people who accepted Islam had deformed genes. And she focused on the fact that these people had deformed genes, and that's why they accepted Islam. So those people who accepted Islam had deformed genes, and over the centuries, these genes degrade further, and that is why we can't live with the Muslims or negotiate with the Muslims. So you can see that the Nazi ideology against Muslims, to say these people are of inferior race, they have deformed genes, they don't belong here, and we want to eliminate them. And that's what we have to prove in a court, which the court established in the case of the Srebrenica, that Srebrenica was a genocide. The courts, one of the cases which I can quote, where the perpetrator was presented to the Hague Tribunal, and who said that he was taught to hate Muslims, that Muslims were inferior. So there's hundreds of evidence where the courts heard these testimonies from the perpetrators that they were taught to hate Muslims. So the Srebrenica genocide is the really, in terms of in modern day, if you look at the example of the worst form of Islamophobia, the worst form of hatred against Muslims, where people hated and were taught to hate so much that they co-opted ordinary people's neighbors to do the killings. And this is what you have to establish in court, and this was established in court, and the court then gave the verdict of genocide in Srebrenica.
And it's this process of dehumanization that is so important within the stages of genocide.
Absolutely. The genocide doesn't happen overnight. There is a whole process, as you have said quite rightly, where people are taught to divide people. So, to classify them, to categorize them firstly into different groups, and then to discriminate against them. So there's 10 stages to genocide, and quite a number of those stages we can identify ourselves in our communities when people are categorized to say it's to create a culture of us and them, and then are taught to discriminate or create an environment to discriminate, and then the environment of hatred through not just words but through the whole culture that you create, and then leading to a period where people are taught, people are co-opted to do the killing. And that's the process that was carried out in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And we see that in other atrocities that have taken place where it was the dehumanization of people, which really led the killers to see the people they're killing as not human, as cockroaches, or something inferior, or something that really deserves to be killed. And it's that kind of ideology which was promoted across Bosnia-Herzegovina against the Muslim community, who have lived together for over 500 years, lived together in a society over the period of 500 years, in a multi-ethnic society, multi-religious society, where people are living together of the same race, speaking the same language for over 500 years. And yet, in 1992, the ideology of division, the ideology of hatred was created to divide people and then co-opt people to do the killings against people that they thought were inferior, not equal. They don't against people that they believe should not belong in the land, against people that they argued that were inferior race or had deformed genes.
Do we see that? I mean, like, there's an argument from some people that we see that even now when it comes to, white kind of deaths in war, which are individualized. Each story is told in, kind of very, tragic detail versus the mass numbers that are killed and anonymized when it comes to brown or black people who are killed. If you compare Ukraine to Gaza, or even the deaths in by Hamas of the Israelis, do you think that that's part of the same thread?
I think it's a really powerful point to say that there's something that I experienced, and I think we witnessed that, don't we? That in UK or in Europe, or that you see that people who look the same. I think we're just seeing now that the Janaza ceremony has started, so I think we're going to move to that, if I may. And what we're seeing right now is while there's wreaths and flowers being laid, continue to be laid at the stone, there's the reading. We're going to now listen to the readings, the prayers.
لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين
I can't manage, I can't seem to hear.
فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرتنا على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمنه وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين صدقكم الله. قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون. قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون. صدق الله العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم. وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون. هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون. اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون. ولو نشاء فنسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشاها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العظيم الفاتحة.
Nakon učenja sure Jasin slijedi izvođenje ilahije Šehidi u interpretaciji Hafiza Ahmeda Alija.
Gdje ste vi? Kraj česme.
We're witnessing the emotional scenes from Srebrenica in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where thousands of people have gathered to pay respects to those people who were murdered in the worst atrocity on European soil since the Second World War in the Srebrenica genocide. And today, 14 bodies that have been found will be buried. We have been listening to the recitation of the Holy Quran, and now we are listening to the Ilahiyah. Ilahiyah recitation, which is Shahidi, is performed in the honor of those who were killed. And Ilahiyah that you're listening to really is a collective remembrance of those people who were killed. And the lyrics really are about on calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive the innocents, those who were murdered, and to award them Jannah. So the Ilahiyah is being performed right now. And at the same time, while the Ilahiyah is being performed, you'd also be seeing that there are people from different countries, ambassadors of different countries, who are laying flowers at the memorial stone, which is in front of the 8,372 graves of innocent people who were killed. So those flowers are being laid while the religious ceremony is also being performed at the same time. These are the 14 coffins of the people who will be buried today, the youngest of which was a 17-year-old boy, and the oldest was 68-year-old man, and they'll be buried today. The Janaza will be held today.
Only the full bodies of, or remains of the victims, is that correct?
This is the director of the Memorial Chari complex, Amir Sulejic. The full bodies, sometimes the bones cannot be found, so the coffins would have either bones of the whole bones of a body or partial, either 50% or 70%, because since 1995 the bones have been searched, and not all the bones of a person has been found. So therefore, burials now take place if 50% or 60% of the bones of a body of a person are found.
Idea of roughly how many more kind of victims are yet to be discovered? You know, obviously we've got, you mentioned 8,732 graves at the moment. Do we know the true number of how many were murdered?
So overall, there were about 100,000 people murdered across Bosnia and Herzegovina, 8,372 murdered in this small area of Potečari, which is in Bosnia. There's still hundreds to be found. Sorry, we're just witnessing the now Inferno, the Srebrenica Inferno being performed by. This is the former mayor of Srebrenica, Chamil Durakovic. The Srebrenica Inferno is being performed by these ladies. The lyrics of the Srebrenica Inferno is Mother, Mother, I still dream of you. Sister, brother, I still dream about you every night. You're not here. I'm searching for you. Wherever I go, I see you. Mother, Father, why aren't you here? This is the lyrics of the Srebrenica poem being performed right now in remembrance of the loved ones that have been lost in the genocide of Muslims in Bosnia-Herzegovina between 1992 and 1995. The lyrics of this song is very powerful, as it says that I'm searching for you, my mother, my sister, my brother, and that search still carries on, where bodies are being found every year, and they are buried. The Janaza takes place every year on 11th of July in this cemetery, in this graveyard.
Obviously, aerial images of the cemetery site at the moment. It is quite a significant location to have placed this memorial.
Yes, this is the place where, when the forces of Mladic entered Srebrenica on 11th of July, Srebrenica fell. People from different villages came to this area. This area is a very small area, but 25,000 people gathered. And this is the area where Mladic promised them that they would be safe. And what we witnessed was that the men and women were separated by Mladic. Men were taken in buses, and the men thought that they were taken to the safe areas, but they were actually taken to be executed and murdered. And the women were taken to rape camps where they were raped. 50,000 women that were raped. The CIA back in 1993 identified 33 rape camps where women were taken to be raped. Hotels were used as rape camps. And one of the most deplorable things that we see is that those hotels have now, rather been turned into a memorial center for those women who were raped, are now used back by the Serbs as a hotel. We're seeing the people walking through the graves of their loved ones and doing their own individual prayer and remembering their loved ones while the Srebrenica Inferno song is being recited. This is the most emotional time for the whole of Bosnia-Herzegovina, but it's also for those 3 million people who were displaced by the genocide and now living in Europe, America, and Canada, who were refugees after the 1995 genocide. But also it should be an emotional time for the whole humanity, because humanity failed to stop the genocide of Muslims in Europe between 1992 and 95, simply because they were Muslim, they had Muslim names, they were murdered.
ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Na osnovu ovlasti proizašlih iz Murasele, koju mi je dodijelio Reisul Ulema, a oslanjajući se na dozvolu o spajanju namaza u posebnim okolnostima,
the dua taking place, the collective dua, the collective prayer. There will be actually, this is not the dua, but this is the reminder. This is the Mufti of Tuzla, who is reminding people that they can combine their prayers. The Zuhr and Asr prayers can be combined. And after this will be the call to prayer, the Azan, and then the Zuhr and Asr prayer will take place. And after that, the Janaza will take place. And after the Janaza will be the speech by the Raisul Ulama, the Grand Mufti of Bosnia, His Eminence Hussein Kavatovic, and then there will be the prayer dua for the martyrs, the shaheeds of the genocide. People will be forming getting ready to pray now, so you can see that they'll be forming into straight lines facing the Qibla, and as you can see that the explanation by the Mufti of Tuzla has been given, that we are now going to that they're now going to pray Zuhr and Asr prayer together, combining them, and the rationale behind combining. This is just a reminder to those people that the prayer will be both Zuhr and Asr prayer.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح
skull shape. The power...
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Are we witnessing some people who in the town of Srebrenica at the memorial Potechari complex to pray for all those people who were murdered simply because of their Muslim identity in the worst atrocity since the Second World War, the genocide of Srebrenica between 1992 and 1995, the Bosnian genocide. The Zuhur prayer is taking place right now. Each year, thousands of people gather on 11th of July to commemorate, to remember all those people who were killed, all those innocent people who were killed simply because of their identity, because they were Muslims, because people who killed them were full of hatred against Muslims. People wanted to destroy them, to eliminate them, so that they can create a pure Serbian territory. The coming together in this way is not just about remembering those who were murdered, not just about the Janaza of those people whose bodies are found, but also saying to those people who hate them, who killed them, and to the world that the Bosnian community are strong and they will stand shoulder to shoulder against all forms of hatred, and that they cannot be eliminated.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
One of the most beautiful sentences I ever heard in my life was when I was speaking to the mothers of Srebrenica who lost all their loved ones, their sons, husbands, their brothers, their whole families were eliminated. And they said that we refuse to hate. So we don't have hatred for those who murdered us, because hatred is weakness. It's also against our faith, against our beliefs. We are Muslims. We want justice. So the Bosnian community, the Muslim community, have been looking for justice. And this is what they have been campaigning for, that all those people who killed them, murdered them, that they brought to justice, that they prosecuted.
اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام.
After the prayers, we'll witness the Janaza prayer, and then the speech by the the Grand Mufti of Bosnia and
أشهد أن
Herzegovina, His
محمدا
Excellency
رسول الله
Hussein
أشهد أن
Kavazovic.
محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الله أكبر.
This is the Grand Mufti of Bosnia and Herzegovina, His Eminence Hussein Kavazovic, who is leading the prayer.
الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
We're witnessing the Zuhur prayer in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the town of Srebrenica, the area of Potachari Memorial Complex, where 8,372 gravestones exist, where those innocent people who were murdered in the worst atrocity on European soil since the Second World War have been laid to rest. After the Zuhr prayer will be the Janaza prayer for those victims, the Janaza prayer for 14 new bodies that are being buried this year. We're seeing thousands of people who have gathered to remember those who were murdered in the genocide between 1992 and 1995, and also to pray the Janaza prayer of the 14 victims who have been identified and will be buried today. Before the prayer, we had people from all over the world, ambassadors of different countries, who laid flowers at the gravestones. And now we see the Grand Mufti, His Eminence Hussein Kavazovic, leading the dua after the prayer. And in the front row, you'll see the President of Bosnia, the current President, Denis Bacirovic, and the former presidents, Bakir Begovic and Shafiq Jafarovic, also present. the other religious scholars who are just behind the Grand Mufti of Bosnia are the muftis of different cities and towns of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
كل نفس ذائقة الموت ثم إلينا ترجعون يا مولانا يا الله عجلوا بالصلاة قبل الفوت وعجلوا بالتوبة قبل الموت يا مولانا يا الله يا الله المرحوم والمغفور محتاج إلى رحمة الله تعالى يا مولانا يا
The Zohar prayer is now over in the town of Srebrenica, in the area of Potechari, where thousands of people have gathered to pray the Janaza prayer of 14 new victims who've been identified in the genocide that took place in Bosnia and Herzegovina between 1992 and 1995, where 100,000 people were murdered across Bosnia and Herzegovina, 8,372 just in the town of Srebrenica. The preparation for the Janaza prayer is now taking place, where the Imam is reciting ayat from the Holy Quran, which reminds people that every soul shall taste death. Kullu nafsin zaiqatul maut. And after the recitation of these ayat from the Holy Quran, the Janaza prayer will then start. These are the gravestones of all those people who have been buried in Srebrenica. The Janaza prayer will be led by the Grand Mufti of Bosnia and Herzegovina, His Excellency Hussein Kavazovic, who is sitting right at the front. You also seeing scholars, scenes of scholars gathered together from different parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who are senior scholars, senior imams, and muftis of different cities and towns in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And of course, the people coming from different villages, different towns across Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as people from different countries who are standing shoulder to shoulder, praying with the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina. There's people from Turkey, people from the UK, people from America, people from different countries who also gather on 11th of July.
يا مولانا يا الله يا الله سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
July is a very hot month in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and you can see people still, despite the heat, are standing shoulder to shoulder to pray the Janaza prayer of the 14 victims who have been identified this year and who will be buried today.
Na njegovu časnu porodicu i sve njegove sljedbenike do sudnjega dana. Draga braćo i sestre, genocid u Srebrenici je priznata svjetska činjenica, čije se nijekanje gubi i postaje nečujno među glasovima dostojanstvenog i javnog sjećanja. Nažalost, polako se umnožavaju i decenije od njegova krvavog događanja, a da se potpuna pravda i istina o žrtvama čekaju. Genocid u Srebrenici je postao kamen međaš naše biološke egzistencije i razdjelnica naše ukupne narodne fizionomije. Mi od prije ne ličimo na sebe od poslije genocida. Srebrenica je postala naše okupljalište, izvorište svijesti o sebi i svijetu u kojem živimo. I danas smo ovdje, u posjeti našim šehidima, u moru bijelih nišana, koji nas podsjećaju na čistoću njihovih duša i nevinost njihovih srca. Ovdje smo zbog njih da ih se sjećamo i upućujemo dove svevišnjemu Bogu. Ali ovdje smo i zbog nas živih, da obnovimo zavjet Bogu, očevima iz zemlji, da više nikada nećemo nikome dozvoliti da nekažnjen počini zločin genocida nad našim narodom. Ovdje smo da se zavjetujemo da ćemo našu zemlju učiniti slobodnom, snažnom i ponosnom mjestom mira i suživota svih njenih ljudi. Zato, braćo i sestre, zagledajmo se u ove bijele nišane, njihovo uspravno i gordo stajanje. To su uskličnici koji nas opominju. Izdignimo se iznad naših prizemnih sebičnosti.
You're watching the Islam Channel's special commemoration event of the 29th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. We've been joined by Dr. Waqar Azmi, doing a brilliant job commenting about the ceremony this afternoon. I believe the Mufti is doing a khutbah at the moment before the bodies are laid to rest. What's the plan for the rest of the afternoon in Srebrenica, Dr. Azmi?
Yeah, so you're right, Samana, that the Grand Mufti Raisul Ulama, His Eminence Hussein Kamazovic, will do the sermon and will also do the dua. And then after that, the carrying of the tabut, the carrying of the coffins of the 14 victims, the youngest of which was 17 when he was murdered, will take place, and that coffin will be taken to the cemetery, and then the burial will take place, the collective burial of those 14 victims, the innocent victims who were murdered. And then there will be further dua and further prayer at the qabr, at the graves of those 14 victims. And after that, people will then depart from the memorial center, from the graveyard, to their homes. And that would be the end of the ceremony. This is a very emotional time, Tamanna, for the whole of Bosnia and Herzegovina, particularly for the Muslims of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Bosnian community in Bosnia, but also those who were made refugees, around 2.5 to 3 million people who now live in Europe or America and Canada. But also, I believe it should be an emotional moment for humanity, because humanity failed Bosnia and Herzegovina in their time of need, where people were murdered simply because of their Muslim identity, in the worst case of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred, promoted by Mladic, Karadzic, and Milosevic, in the worst genocide that we've seen since the Second World War. That you see the spirit here of the Bosnian community coming together, praying together, paying respect, remembering, and burying those who've been found, the new bodies who've been found. And this is a spirit that will carry on forevermore. And this is the spirit that all of humanity should stand shoulder to shoulder against the atrocities that are taking place in the world, against hatred of all forms, and against fascism, and that we see in this world.
Well, Dr. Waqar Azmi, thank you so much for your expertise and guiding us through what has been a very moving Janaza ceremony. We are going to move on to our next guest, but we will move back to the pictures when I'm sure if the bodies get buried, as the bodies are laid to rest as the afternoon goes. But I just want to introduce another guest for at the moment, Toby Cadman. He's a barrister specialising in international criminal and human rights law. He was previously head of the Bosnian prosecution section for war crimes, and he joins me on the show now via video. Good afternoon, Toby.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your role.
So I was based in Bosnia from 2002 to 2009. Also, my wife is Bosnian who lived through the siege of Sarajevo from 92 to 95. And so I had a particular connection to Bosnia already. So when I moved there, initially I worked as a human rights lawyer, and then I was recruited to head the international support section to the Bosnian State Prosecutor's Office, and headed the legal advisory section and was an advisor to the chief prosecutor. And one of my responsibilities was on managing the Srebrenica cases. And so I spent a significant amount of time in Srebrenica and was able to see the devastation that was caused, the aftermath, and how a process of justice and accountability was addressed by both the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, but also the Bosnian State Court and the international community more broadly, what it was able to do. And also was able to see the complete absence of any transitional justice element other than prosecutions. So I had the opportunity to be there for a number of years and still travel back to Bosnia now.
You mentioned that there was an absence of justice for the victims. I mean, we did see in the ICTY that Mladic and Karadzic, they have been prosecuted. They were accused of the various crimes. And what makes you say that the victims have not received the justice?
Well, I think you have to look at justice in the broader sense of the meaning, and you have to look at what justice means to individual victims. I mean, having spoken to the mothers of Srebrenica, and when I say there's an absence of justice, what I mean is that there's an absence of a transitional justice strategy that deals with more than just prosecutions, because obviously to establish a process of truth, justice and accountability, it has to be about more than just criminal prosecutions. And you have to recognise that the scale of the atrocities in Srebrenica, of course, there were atrocities across Bosnia and Herzegovina. More than 200,000 people were killed. But the concentration of over 8,000 killed in the circumstances in which they were killed in and around Srebrenica requires a particular focus on a longer term transitional justice component. And so when the mothers of Srebrenica and when, if we look further afield to Prijedor as another example, when the mothers and the children and the grandparents see the perpetrators still holding positions of authority, still walking around with complete impunity, you have to ask yourself, how can a society ever reconcile when you've never dealt with this as a longer term strategy? So I think that that's something that remains missing, and that's something that we see even now. The political situation in Bosnia is still very much divided. I mean, if we look at when the referral to the UN General Assembly was made, and for the commemoration of today being the first day following that, if you look at the president of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, draped in the flag of Serbia, in tears that the world is recognizing Srebrenica as genocide, it shows how little distance we've traveled since 1995.
And it's interesting because Srebrenica is obviously within the Republic of Srpska, this sort of strange entity within Bosnia itself. And there's an element of genocide denial that continues even within Bosnia itself.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen it. There was an incident last year in relation to Visegrad, not too far away from Srebrenica, which effectively is where some of the first elements of the conflict started. And we saw the very right-wing movement targeting non-Serbs, particularly targeting Bosniaks, refusing to recognise Srebrenica as a genocide. But we've experienced that for years. I mean, I remember when I was travelling to Srebrenica with our prosecution team, with our investigators, the sheer animosity that was shown towards us because we were investigating that community for having perpetrated a genocide. And that hasn't gone away, unfortunately. There are still those that see Radovan Karadzic, Radoslav Krstic, Ratko Mladic, Slobodan Milosevic, they see them as national heroes still to this day. You travel in different parts of Republika Srpska and you can still buy cups and towels with their faces on them as national heroes. And we now see again this rising, both in Bosnia and in Kosovo, a very, very dangerous Serbian nationalist rhetoric supported by Russia. It is a very, very dangerous time.
And I mean, it's very difficult to sort of look at what's happened with Srebrenica, with Bosnia, what continues to happen, and not kind of look at the echoes of that and what's happening with Gaza at the moment. What do you think about that?
Well, certainly I think that the parallels are there to be drawn. Certainly the complete dehumanization of the victims and the victim community. What we saw in Srebrenica, even what we saw in 1994 in Rwanda, when we see the Tutsi being referred to as cockroaches. We see the Palestinians, and particularly the Gazans, being referred to as human animals, as they're all terrorists. We saw the same level of dehumanization by the army of Republika Srpska and their political leaders in 1995, particularly in 1995. Of course, the conflict itself started in 92, and there were elements, particularly in eastern Bosnia, where non-Serbs were targeted. But the complete dehumanization of Bosnian Muslims in and around Srebrenica, we are seeing the same kind of language coming out of Gaza. I mean, if we look at just yesterday, reports being released from soldiers, Israeli soldiers, that are being told to target all Palestinians because there are no civilians, meaning they're the attempt to dehumanize and label them as non-humans or as animals to be eradicated, that is the same language that the likes of Ratko Mladic used leading up to July 1995. And so we see, we always say the reason why we address this is so we can shout the mantra of never again. But what we see consistently is again and again that we seem to learn nothing from conflict to conflict. I think one of the difficulties for Bosnia in particular, and in particular Srebrenica, is that when you have Syria, you have Yemen, you have Ukraine, you now have Sudan rising up again, you have Gaza, the focus is taken away. And I think that a lot of us who still focus on Bosnia and Srebrenica are very depressed by the fact, one, that we've learned nothing, and two, that we move on very, very quickly.
Yes, and which is why I guess events like today are extremely important, just to sort of, I guess to remind everybody again. Thank you so much, Toby Cadman, for your time here today and your commentary. I really appreciate it. Right, okay, we're almost at the end of our special programming today. We have time for just one last break, and then we'll be back with another guest to finish off our commemoration programme.
احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
"29 years of denial and only classed as genocide several years ago, bringing little justice or solace to those seeking to bury loved ones. Their wounds still healing, Srebrenica must be remembered."
احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
We came to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as well.
The losing team out that way.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارع وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافق.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
We came to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Pass. Pass as well.
The losing team out that way.
هذا فتى قريش ومصارع وفارس وسفيرها ولسانها إذا نافق.
أنت يا علي احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم.
Five Pillars is not just any ordinary game show. It's a unique platform to deepen our understanding of Islam and strengthen our connection with our faith.
We came to win.
50 points. Give that to me.
Oh my god, I don't know.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Islam channel, where we have a special morning and early afternoon commemorating the 20th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. We've just spent the last hour or so in Potocari in Srebrenica following the action as the bodies of 14 victims were laid to rest. On the screen right now you can see the aerial images of the burial taking place and the number of and all of the grieving Bosnians who have come to pay their respects. And I'm joined now on the line by Sarah Hukic. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Sarah. Now, you're a Bosnian and you've had an extraordinary start in life. Tell me about your history.
So thank you so much for having me on the show. So with me, I was born at the start of war. So I'm a 92 baby. The war had just started to break out when I was born. Unfortunately for me, I never got to meet my father. He sadly got killed at the start of the Bosnian War. And his remains are yet to be found. We have no clue where he's been buried or where he even went missing. It's still 32 years on. By my birth mother, I was abandoned as well during the war. So not only did I lose one parent, I lost another parent. And I was taken on by Mevlida, which I'm sure she's been on the program before, and many of you who followed the history of Srebrenica and the Bosnian genocide would have heard of her. She took me on and looked after me and brought me up as her own, basically. And here I am now, just trying to spread the awareness of what has happened and for all the children that were left behind. Because I feel we don't speak up enough because many of us don't remember what had happened, especially for me. I was just a baby when it broke out. So you almost feel like there's a barrier where there's only so much you can say just because you're not aware of, you feel like you don't have the same platform of somebody who does remember what had happened during the genocide. So, yeah.
I mean, that's a really tragic story. I'm so sorry for your loss. It must have taken an enormous amount of courage for your adoptive mother to decide to adopt you, because that wasn't straightforward either, was it?
No, it wasn't at all. Especially at the time, she was only 26 years old, and she had already lost a numerous amount of members from her family who had joined the army, or just there was, because they didn't really have an army established. So whoever was going out to fight, it was just more of a case, we're here just to defend our people. So her brothers, were two of those people who unfortunately got killed as well. And like I said, 26 years old and taking on a child who's not biologically yours during that period of time, where you don't know what's going to happen to you, let alone, a child. And of course, that child is now your amana from, Allah. So your responsibility for that child is even greater now. So yeah, but alhamdulillah, she did it. So yeah.
And she had lost her own child as well.
She did, yes, she did. She had a baby girl whom she had lost. And she always says to me, she goes, Allah is almost as if he took one daughter away from me just to give me another. So yeah.
You mentioned sort of feeling a little bit on the sidelines because you're a child, you don't remember. I mean, that's one of the main issues with war. You often concentrate on the number of dead and kind of the circumstances in which they died, but actually the people who live and survive, they have to face the consequences and deal with the aftermath.
Yeah, so it's very difficult because you are part of that history. Well, you are that history, aren't you? Because you're born during that period of time. But at the same time, you just feel almost like you don't have a right to say anything because you don't remember it. But if it isn't for us, remembering it and us continuing to remind people of, well, we are the ones left behind. You took our mothers, you took our brothers, you took our fathers, and we are now left with nothing and still searching, for our loved ones. So it is very difficult to feel like you have that, platform. But I think the more of us that speak out, the more of us that create that, community, we will also allow other children that maybe have felt how I have been feeling, that it's okay, even though you do not remember, you still have that right, just as everyone else, to speak on about Srebrenica, because we are those children who have lost, our parents and numerous amount of family members.
And what does it mean for you then, that one decision that your adoptive mother took? I mean, there were so many children who were orphaned by this war, and you were one baby who was plucked out of that tragic, terrible circumstance. What does it mean for you on a personal level that this happened for you?
To be honest with you, I always say to her, no matter what I have in this world, I can never ever repay you for what you've given me and what you've sacrificed for me. I could have been, like you said, one of those, just one other number of, orphan child, but my destiny was obviously different. I was, my purpose, I feel like my purpose is different. I feel like my purpose is maybe to speak out. My purpose is to raise awareness on behalf of the children of Srebrenica who were left orphaned. And no matter what, what I have, I can never repay her for all her efforts and all her hard work, bringing up a child, in a country that she doesn't speak the language in a place where she looks different, she sounds different, and then to have to, establish herself, but also establish me, and dealing with traumas of what she's just gone through. Because it wasn't a case of, okay, the war happened and then, a few years went on and then she took me on. It was a case of it's breaking out, they're invading, you leave now, or you don't know what can happen to you. So it was a split-second decision. Either I leave this child or I take this child with me, and then moving on to Denmark, because we lived in Denmark as well for a period of time. So living there and dealing with the Islamophobia that was going on there at the time, it wasn't easy for her. So yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about that. So I mean, as you mentioned, you became a refugee, you and your mother. You went to Denmark, and then you came to the UK.
Yes.
What does it mean to be a refugee then? Because often particularly in the UK, in the last few months, we've heard it, in the run up to the elections, the small boat crossings and people not wanting refugees and being a drain on society. But you were a child of war. Can you tell me, like, what did that mean for you, and how does it feel when you hear that kind of rhetoric coming from politicians now?
To be honest with you, it's very difficult, because you hear it and you're just thinking to yourself, well, I don't want to leave my home country. Bosnia is beautiful. If any of you have seen or been to Bosnia, it's a beautiful country, and it's not somewhere anybody would want to leave, but it's under the circumstances that we had to leave. And people don't just decide that they want to leave because they don't like where they're living. It's a case of they're deciding to leave because they can't live in the place that they're currently at, whether it's war, whether it's poverty, whether it's the fact that that country itself has invaded that country and made living conditions very difficult for those people. And so being a refugee, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to bring bad things to the country. It just means that that person is in a situation where they need help.
And we're seeing images now on the screen of some of the remains of some of the victims being lowered into the ground and buried. Have you ever been back to Srebrenica? Have you been back to Bosnia? And what was that like?
I have. Yes, I have. I haven't been during any of the burial ceremonies, unfortunately. But I have been, outside of, the commemoration day, or outside of 11th of July. And it's heart-wrenching when you go there, but at the same time, I cannot describe it other than very peaceful. It's the atmosphere, the air, it's so calming that when you go there, you almost feel like a sense of relief. Seeing, all the headstones, it's overwhelming, but at the end of the day, you do say, alhamdulillah, for that person that has been found, whether it's one part of them or the whole body, or it's a finger. At the end of the day, alhamdulillah, that they have been found. But for me personally, I haven't been, only because my father still hasn't been found. And I'm only now of age where I understand properly about the genocide and what has happened. And I've decided myself, to look into it a lot more. But back then I was very young, and, I'm very sensitive as well. So my mum was always trying to almost, I would say, protect me as well, keep me in like a bubble of, seeing those heartbreaking, burials. And it's not just the bodies that are, well, not even bodies, they're remains, aren't they? So the remains that are being buried, but it's the people around you, just you turn to your left and you see one family member breaking down and, collapsing, because they've waited years for this moment, to be able to bury their loved ones. So yeah, no, I haven't personally been.
And you mentioned that you hadn't found your father's remains. How significant is it, do you think, for families who have been waiting for many, many decades, when there are, as you mentioned, it's not necessarily a whole body, it could be just, a single bone. How significant is it to just be able to put that part of the body into the ground? What would that mean to you if it was your father had been found?
I always say I will take it even if it's one finger, because it just gives me a place to go and sit and make dua for him. And it just allows me, the sense of peace that I know my father is buried in this location. the unknown is just, where is he? What had happened to him? You know, you overthink a million scenarios of what could have been. Was he, was he killed in an instance by a bomb, or was he tortured, or, was he one of those that was, found and buried and reburied? What had happened to him? That's the hardest part of dealing without when you're father or whoever family member hasn't been found. So finding them, it plays a big part to us, because as years go on, we don't exactly, time doesn't stand still for us. We don't exactly stop aging. So every year, whenever there's a memorial, that means we're 1 year older, which means, of course, death can come at any point. But, as humans, we always think, we will live, till the age of 80. But as that time goes on, and your loved one is not found, it's just another year closer to death for those who have been left behind. So just not knowing if you will ever find them, it can be very difficult, because it's trauma, isn't it? It's trauma, and you're hurting because you will never get closure. I always say, I don't think I will ever have closure, even with my father being found. But it's just that sense of relief that I have a place to go. I know where my dad is, and I think that is the most significant thing for me personally. But yeah, I think it's supportive for everyone. And presumably this is why it's such an important event for all the Bosnians around the world to commemorate this particular event. I guess it represents not only the deaths and murders in Srebrenica, but throughout the war as well. Sarah, thank you so much for giving us your time and talking to us about what is a very harrowing experience for you. We really appreciate it. Thank you for having me. And thank you very much to the audience as well for listening to us as we had our special programme on the 29th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. It's a particularly poignant year, given what's happening in Gaza, Sudan, and many other places across the globe as well. Let's make dua, inshallah, that all oppression across the world ends soon.
احرص على محمد أكثر من حرصك على نفسك.
فمن كان على أمر من أمور المسلمين فليتق الله فيهم